One of my clients asked me this week, what do you know about us being in a housing bubble? They bought a house last year. Of course, they paid more than list price. I sent them an equity update this week, and it shows that houses are actually selling a little bit higher than what they paid in their neighborhood. So that's really great for them. But they've been watching the news and hearing talk about a housing bubble, and they wanted to know what my thoughts were on that. So my answer to, are we in a housing bubble? Maybe. I don't actually know. I'm not really sure that anybody really knows. Sure, there are statisticians, people a lot smarter than me with numbers who say, oh, yes, we're in a housing bubble and here's why. And then there's others that say, no, we're not in a housing bubble. So let's look back at the last recession, 2007-ish. The cause of, I think they're calling that the Great Recession, was loose lending guidelines. Back then, they would give money to anybody. As a matter of fact, I was one of the anybody's that got money. I bought a house over the internet in 2007 without a job. I got a mortgage with no income. What? That's crazy. Granted, I got a job and it was all okay. And I have since sold that house and life is great. Everybody got paid. But that's just an example of the loose lending guidelines in 2007 and the few years before that, where it was like money was growing on trees and they were giving it to anybody. And a lot of those anybody's couldn't actually pay their loans back, or they had crazy terms on the loans, like interest only, and the payments were really unaffordable and high because it was just bad lending guidelines. And people who should never have been able to buy a house at the price points that they were buying ultimately foreclosed. And then we had an awful lot of that. And then the economy turned. Oh, bad times. So that resulted in the Great Recession and, of course, a change in the housing market. Now, they say that the housing market is cyclical. Every 10 years, we're going to cycle. So around 2018, I started thinking, okay, well, when is this going to change? Surely it's been 10-ish years. Any day now, the market is going to shift. And obviously, it's 2022 and the market has not shifted down anyway. It's kind of shifted up. Inventory right now is so low that it kind of feels like a bubble, because when you have low inventory and high demand, prices naturally go up. And when prices go up, that gives you the feeling of, oh my gosh, we're in a bubble. When is it going to burst? So let's just say we are in a bubble and it's going to burst. The economy takes a tank. People start laying jobs off. Although, aren't we in the Great Resignation? Maybe it'll turn into the Great Unemployment. I don't know. And then interest rates will go up. For example, in the bubble bursting scenario, all of that creates a perfect storm for a bubble to pop. So how does this affect you? Well, let's assume you keep your job. You remain employed. Cool. I mean, obviously, if the economy tanks, your 401k might take a hit. Mine has taken a hit the last couple of months as it is. So hopefully that turns around very quickly, because I mean, all of us with 401ks would like it to go the opposite direction. But when it comes to your house, you already own your house. You already have a mortgage. As long as you keep paying that, they're not going to take it away. And even if the housing market prices trend down, that's really only going to affect you if you have to sell. So if you don't have to sell, you'll just keep paying your mortgage and, wait another few years and the prices will go back up, because that is historically proven. What goes up must go down. What goes down does come up. Now, if you do have to sell, well, if the market value, if you, like my clients, they paid a good price for this house last year and it was a price that they were willing to pay. So they actually are the ones that set the market value, because they were the highest bid out of, 3 to 5 bids on this house, if I remember correctly. But if the market tanks and their market value for the house goes down below what they paid and they have to sell, well, they might be sad in that case. Of course, in their situation, they put a lot of money down for a down payment. So ideally, they would still have equity in their house. So if they had to sell, they hopefully would not have to bring money to the table. That's when it gets really bad. So I remember in the early 2010s, when I first became a real estate agent, people had to sell their homes and they couldn't get what they paid for it. And that's where this fear of a bubble bursting comes from, because those people had to sell So they oftentimes had to bring cash to the table to close, which is no fun. I promise you, it's no fun. My husband had to do that. And he still talks about it to this day of how terrible it was when he sold his house because he lost money. And it was like not very much money that he lost. So imagine the people who are losing $30,000, $40,000 on selling their house in 2009, 10, 11. Those people, they're probably really still talking about it. In those cases, if you have to sell and you have to take a loss, well, you might have to dip into your 401k or any other savings that you might have to make up the difference. Markets like that, we might start seeing more short sales, which is a topic for another day, but that is essentially when you're selling your house for less than what you owe on it. And now the bank has to get involved. And it's a long process. It's a bad deal. So hopefully we're not in a bubble. And hopefully those are things that we don't see happening. But if we do, it really only affects you if you have to sell. And then it only affects you if you have to sell and it ends up selling for less than what you owe. Sure, it sucks to sell for less than what you paid, but timing is everything. I mean, that's just how it goes. The other side of taking a hit when selling your house is that hopefully you get a really good deal on the house that you're buying. The flip side of that is true in today's market where inventory is low, it's a seller's market. So when you're selling your house, you get a great price. But on the flip side, well, you pay a great price when you're buying a house too. So if you're taking a hit when you're selling your house, if the economy takes a tank and the bubble bursts, whether or not we're even in a bubble, just for example's sake, then ideally you would get a great deal on the house that you're buying that more than makes up for the loss that you feel you have on the house that you sold. And you also have other options instead of selling. You could rent your house. You could stay living in your house. A lot of times in the past, people moved because they got new jobs. Well, maybe you could work remotely today. That'd be cool. Work remote in your house until you can afford to sell. You could keep your house, rent it to somebody else, and let someone else pay your mortgage for you. Sure, it's not ideal because you own a home you don't live in. Accidental landlords are a thing. I was one, but it is a means to an end when the housing market isn't strong enough to support the price that you want to get for your house. Who knows? You could even Airbnb a room in your house and have your overnight guests pay your mortgage payment for you. You all live happily ever after under one roof. It's 2022, man. Anything can happen. All of this to say, I don't really think that we're in a bubble right now. At least we're not in a bubble like the bubble that happened in, what do we even call that? In the preteens. In the 2000s, 2006, 7, 8, 9, whatever that few years time frame is called, that was a totally different situation than what we have today. So what we have today is really based on not having enough houses for people. So the supply chain from COVID has really affected the speed of which new construction can be built. There's also a lot of other issues involved in new construction. The price of everything has gone up significantly. So there's not really a lot of entry level price points like there have been historically for new construction. It's a lot of things, but it's not what it was 15 years ago. I also think that there's a subset of people who would have sold in 2020, except when COVID hit. For some reason, they decided not to. Or maybe it's because the interest rates were incredibly low. Some people refinance their house under 3% interest. That's nuts. That is so low. Low interest rates on a house that you're already okay living in is hard to give up to pay a slightly higher interest rate today, B3, maybe 3.25, whatever the rates are. And now they're trending up slowly by day, but that's hard to give up a really low interest rate in a house that technically you're totally fine living in to move to a different house that might cost you a lot more money because prices are high and it'd be a slightly higher interest rate. I mean, like it's just a different situation than what we saw 15 years ago. So a lot of these things are contributing to the low inventory, but that's really what we're in. And it's just as simple as supply and demand. To get out of this, to burst this bubble, really, we need a lot more houses to come on the market for sale. And so when we see more inventory for sale, we'll start seeing prices level out. and they might level out a little bit as interest rates go up. While I work in real estate, I am hardly a fortune teller. So I can tell you what I know and what I believe to be true. But like I said at the beginning, there are a lot of people smarter than me with numbers. But honestly, I don't think any of us know what's actually going on until we're out of it. So at some point in the future, we might look back and say, oh, yeah, that's what that was. It wasn't a bubble, it was a blip. I don't know. Who knows what we're even going to call it? But I also wouldn't let fear of what's going to happen in the near future or the far future stop me from doing what I wanted to do today. If you're thinking about buying a house, give us a call and we'll talk through your options. And maybe it's the right time for you, maybe it's not. If you're thinking about selling, but you're really not sure how that's going to work to sell your house, and then will you be able to find a new one? Because all I've talked about is inventory is low. Yes, we will find you one. I promise. We have a lot of systems in place to help get you through that process. And a video that I did recently talking about options for sellers in a low inventory market, how you can do both buy and sell at the same time. The long and the short of it is I've been waiting since 2018 for the other shoe to drop, for the market to shift, and it has not happened. So that's just me being pragmatic, thinking, okay, well, it's a 10-year cycle and it hasn't happened. So don't listen to anybody installing fear into you about what is coming, because they don't really know what's coming either. I mean, if you remember, nobody really knew that the recession was coming in 2008, whenever it happened, except that one guy that had that movie. But everybody else was kind of surprised about it. You do you. What's best for you. And if we can be of help and service to you, give us a call. Our contact information is below this video. We have a lot of resources on our website for you for both buyers and sellers. And if there's anything you need, we're here for it. Talk to you soon.